I'm Mitch Simpler, Managing Partner of Jaros, Baum, Bolles Consulting Engineers, and one of the 5 founding members of the steering committee which put the symposium together, because we really felt that this was something that was desperately needed, and I hope you will agree by the end of the day. So first of all, thank you all for coming, and welcome to the premier symposium for the Life Sciences Real Estate Development meeting. This is going to be a very interesting, educational, and exciting day. This is where the New York real estate community meets the New York science industry and reimagines the future of New York City through biology. We have a terrific response to the creation of the symposium, as evidenced by the crowd here today, and I really want to especially thank our sponsors, our press partners, and our association sponsors for supporting this effort and all the hard work they've put into making this symposium a success. First, we'd like to thank our 2018 gold sponsor, Alcos Manfredi. Raise your hand. Our other silver sponsors are CBRE, Hines, Perkins Eastman, Onyx, Perkins & Will, Boston Properties, SL Green, Related, and Vornado Realty Trust. I'd also like to thank Zetlin and DiChiara for being today's AV sponsor, McNamara Salvia for sponsoring the giveaway bags, Jack L. Gordon Architects as our lanyard sponsor, and finally Milrose Consultants, who is the break sponsor. So my role is to give you a quick overview of what to expect for the day, and let me get going. The life science industry in New York is poised for rapid growth, but is currently constrained by the lack of available and affordable laboratory space in locations that have a clustering effect, thereby creating synergies where research, investment, and technology transfer can take place and create new opportunities. There's only 1.7 million square feet of commercial life science real estate in New York City, all of which is fully occupied. The lack of suitable lab space for small companies to grow and develop is an especially acute problem. New York City has recently responded by reinterpreting the zoning definition of laboratory use, which has expanded the geographic areas in which labs can be located within the city, thus making more buildings available for adaptive reuse as life science. The shortage of supply is further complicated by a simple lack of knowledge and understanding among the New York real estate community about the potential for the life science market, the specialized infrastructure needs required by life science occupancies, and finally the financial components and development and lease transaction details that life science companies require. Today's symposium is specifically and intentionally designed to educate and enlighten the New York real estate community about the key drivers of the life science industry in New York City, as well as the challenges. The symposium is especially timely since New York City Economic Development Corporation is in the midst of evaluating proposals to establish a new life science hub somewhere in New York City. This flagship project of Life Science New York City is a 10-year, $500 million commitment to New York City's life science sector by New York City. There's also a number of recent and important developments that will increase demand for life science space for the coming years. New startups launched by respected scientists from many of New York's leading academic institutions with major financing from established venture capital investors will require significant expansion space in the coming years. Firms like Calliope, Quintus Therapeutics, Petra Pharma, Lodo Therapeutics, and Kyra Therapeutics are just a few of these emerging companies. As an example, 2 new incubators, J Labs at New York City and Biolabs of New York, both located in the Hudson Square neighborhood, are expected to graduate over 60 new startup companies within the next 2 years. So on to the agenda. We have a full day scheduled, which is packed with terrific speakers from both the real estate and life science communities. Throughout the day, we will be exploring the progress and potential that New York has to fuel the growth of the life science sector and establish New York as a major life science cluster akin to the powerhouses of Boston and San Francisco. Today's symposium will consist of 2 keynote speakers and 6 panel discussions, each moderated by a prominent New York City real estate developer or a prominent service leader. We start out with our keynote address, giving an overview of what's happening in the life science industry and why it is so important to grow and support this sector in New York. We then move on to examine the implications of current life science developments for New York City. Where does New York stand versus its competitors in the life science cluster market? What is New York City EDC's vision for the Applied Life Science Hub and other programs? This session will also explore the nuts and bolts of developing life science space, such as site selection criteria and required building characteristics. Finally, this session will explore what life science development could mean for one representative neighborhood in the city, namely Hudson Square. The next session has several leading developers and architects who will discuss what New York City can learn from the competition and why the life science industry is so interested in New York now. Then, a building owner will lead a conversation with an executive from an academic medical center about how these centers for research and clinical care have created millions of square feet of state-of-the-art, world-class facilities in challenging and constrained urban environments. Then the symposium will switch gears from the real estate perspective to the life sciences perspective with a bridge presentation by our second keynote, an internationally renowned artist who creates light sculpture installations. Jesus. For those of you who know me, I really don't read well. But this is too important. I can't ad-lib it. I took a break. So, our second keynote, an internationally renowned artist who creates light sculpture installations around the world and in New York City, inspired by natural environments, architecture, and technology. She will discuss reimagining New York City using biology. Several speakers will then address several of the new and emerging fields in the life sciences that are likely to drive future growth, not only in the development of new drugs and personalized medical treatment, but also in design, new materials, energy, agricultural, chemicals, and bioremediation. During the next panel, more mature companies will discuss the unique life science real estate requirements that stem from unique science that they are pursuing or products that they are developing. The challenges of finding appropriate life science space and the competitive pressures from surrounding life science clusters will be discussed. We will then explore 3 cases for adaptive reuse of existing facilities with a range of experts who worked on these 3 projects and what it took to make them successful in New York City. The symposium will conclude with the introduction of a new membership and programming initiative called New York City Builds BioPlus. This symposium is intended to be the first in a series of meetings along with other relevant activities that the New York City life sciences and real estate development communities will pursue together. And we'll discuss that at the final panel session. Last but certainly not least, at the end of the day, my favorite, wine, cheese, and hors d'oeuvres. And more importantly, give us a chance to reflect about what we learned and what we need to learn and where we go from here. So relax, listen, and be entertained. So next, I'm going to introduce our first keynote, wherever she is. There she is. Nancy Kelley. It's my pleasure to introduce Nancy J. Kelley, someone who has played a leading role in the design, development, and build-out of much of the commercial life science space built in New York City. She is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Nancy J. Kelley and Associates, a firm that specializes in building things that matter for science and medicine. The firm specializes in 5 major areas. First, the creation of game-changing institutions like New York Genome Center, the Center of Excellence for Engineering Biology, GP Wright, and the Biodesign Challenge, just to name a few. Second, the design and development of construction of life science environments. Third, the evaluation of cutting-edge technologies. Fourth, the engagement of the local community through workshops and major meetings just like this one. And finally, through groundbreaking research, including the very first life science real estate report to compile information and statistics on the global life science real estate market. Previously, Nancy served as the founding executive director of the New York Genome Center. Her other leadership history includes work in scientific institutions, life science companies, life science real estate development. She was a leader for the team that won the highly competitive selection process to develop East River Science Park. She has overseen major development projects for clients such as the National Institutes of Health, Johns Hopkins University, MIT, and the Boston University Medical Center. Ms. Kelley has served on the boards of the New York Genome Center, the Jackson Laboratory, Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, and the Whitehead Institute in Boston. Her talk today is entitled, "The 21st Century Will Be the Century of Biology." Nancy?
Thank you all for being here. I am just thrilled to see so many old friends and new friends in this audience and to bring the life sciences and real estate community together in this way. It's just so exciting for me after working at this for almost 15 years now. It's been like pushing a boulder up the mountain. But I think we're finally at a tipping point, and so I'm really excited to share some ideas and some trends with you this morning about what is happening in the life science industry. So early in this decade, two giants of biology and technology, Craig Venter and Steve Jobs, made predictions for the coming century. If the 20th century was the century of physics, Craig Venter said, the 21st century will be the century of biology. Steve Jobs agreed. The biggest innovations of the 21st century will be at the intersection of biology and technology. And today, only a decade or so later, we are well into that shift. Many refer to the changes that we're experiencing right now as a fourth industrial revolution that is characterized by a fusion of technologies that is blurring the lines between the physical, digital, and biological realms. And consequently, the life sciences and healthcare industries are dynamic, changing, and evolving. The industry is being driven by rapid technological change. Some examples of this are high-throughput next-generation sequencing, which reads the genome to determine your personal genetic makeup. The convergence of computational modeling, bioinformatics, data, artificial intelligence to compile large data sets and find patterns. Engineering biology, where scientists are actually writing DNA in silico and then producing it using automated synthesis and design assembly techniques. New tools and software that are accelerating and expanding the pace of change. Examples, multiplex automated genome engineering, or MAGE. Some of you may have heard of CRISPR-Cas9, which is a gene editing tool, and 3D printing. All of this is causing big shifts in the scientific environment. We have increasingly complex scientific problems that require multidisciplinary teams and multiple institutions. The rigid hierarchical laboratory structure is breaking down in the face of technological change and financial constraints. There is now no clear path for large numbers of young postdocs who are anxious to join startups, creating a ready labor pool. And there's increasing numbers of non-academic scientists who are available for employment in the industry. Many of these have just come from big pharma. Blended funding mechanisms are emerging. Big science is no longer dependent on government funding alone in the face of declining funds for basic research. Funding now comes from a variety of sources: philanthropic, private, academic, and public. Examples of this are the Science Philanthropy Alliance, where 6 foundations have set a 5-year goal of increasing funding for basic research by $1 billion annually. The Faculty Scholars Competition, where Gates, Simons, and the Howard Hughes Foundations gave $148 million over 5 years to fund promising early-stage researchers. And finally, a trend we've all heard about is billionaires that are funding science, including Gates, Zuckerberg, and Schmidt in the forefront. There are similar shifts taking place in the pharma environment. Expiring patents and the need for innovation have spawned waves of restructuring, downsizing amidst big pharma. With the introduction of precision medicine, we're witnessing a shift from population to personalized medicine, with a focus on small, flexible projects versus the large-scale, fully integrated R&D and manufacturing projects that we saw before. And this has created a power shift from large pharma to smaller, more entrepreneurial biotechs that alters the space equation for life science. We also have a focus on more specialized diseases with smaller number of patients that versus the large mass blockbuster drug approaches that we saw in the past. And this means smaller, more targeted clinical trials for the future. All of these changes have resulted in new ways of working. Scientific discovery is no longer dependent on a single scientist that is working in a lab surrounded by a group of postdocs and working on a single problem for publication. The new paradigm is all about outsourcing and innovation. And you can see automation and outsourcing of basic laboratory functions in companies like Emerald Cloud Laboratories, Zymergen, Transcriptics, all of which are located on the West Coast. And then you have virtual global laboratories like Science Exchange, which is making use of excess capacity in experienced laboratories around the world, also on the West Coast. Crowdsourcing. This is the process of obtaining needed services, ideas, or content by soliciting contributions from a large online community. And there are platforms for funding, problem-solving, freelancing, you name it today. And the DIY movement is democratizing science. These are citizen scientists that are seeking knowledge and expertise in biology. And we have the first community lab that was the forerunner of this movement, GenSpace, here in New York City, and they'll be speaking this afternoon. And finally, breakout labs, which link scientific innovators with a network of investors, advisors, and partners. This is very similar to Y Combinator and IndieBio, who you might have heard of. These disruptive new technologies and emerging trends are transforming both life sciences and healthcare, fusing biology, engineering, design, and manufacturing. Some examples. Advanced diagnostic testing. Multi-analyte panels are replacing single analyte panels, resulted in targeted treatments for patients. Precision medicine. Shift from a one-size-fits-all to targeted treatments based on a person's genetic makeup. Synthetic biology. Scientists are writing DNA to create new life forms and recreate naturally occurring compounds that are hard to obtain or in short supply. And Modern Meadow is an example of that, and they'll be speaking this afternoon. Tissue engineering combines scaffolds, cells, and biologically active materials into functional tissue. EpiBone will speak to you about that this afternoon. And point-of-care diagnostic technologies. These are highly mobile, simple-to-use devices that are implemented by lower-skilled health workers and delivered directly to poor populations in third world countries for better access to care in cases of HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria. And finally, wearable technologies. We probably all have some on today, which focus on wellness and monitoring to assist individuals to maintain precision wellness. All of these changes are opening up new markets for biological innovation in agriculture, chemicals, bioremediation, energy, advanced materials, fashion, and direct-to-consumer healthcare. I would predict that in 50 years, many of the products that we use will have a biological component to them. And these will be products as varied as apparel, footwear, our homes, automotive, and architecture. These changes will significantly influence where life science is located, as well as the nature of employment over the next century, giving New York City the opportunity to regain ground on powerhouse life science clusters like Boston and San Francisco. And the reason for this is that New York City has the enviable position of pairing world-class academic centers with leading institutions in the fields of design, finance, food, media, technology, and philanthropy like nowhere else in the world. But also, increasing globalization means international as well as national competition for life science clusters, and we need to keep an eye on that. In addition to the traditional lab requirements, these market changes will require new workplace types and new real estate configurations, from shared workspaces, rentable, flexible lab benches, automated, virtually accessible labs, to industrial scale-up and fermentation. The emphasis is on collaboration and interaction between biology and other disciplines, and New York will need the spaces that foster that. Community meetups, galleries, events, test kitchens, open houses, workforce training, town halls, creative residencies. And finally, during the century of biology, the intersection of biology and technology plays to New York City's strengths, creating a large economic opportunity that this city should not miss. Let's develop a life science ecosystem truly reflective of New York City's diversity and resources, utilizing all of the potential and strength. That is really why we're here today, to explore all of these concepts together and to re-envision New York City using biology. So thank you very much for being here.